why am I reviewing an 8-year-old cube? Mainly because I think it's unique and its features would probably be forgotten with newer cube releases, so I kind of want to make a video to remember it. It's a bit crazy to think that the Weichuang GTS 5x5 model itself is going to turn 8 years old this year. I remember first getting this as a main and watching videos where people compare it against a Wushuang. This is not an Wushuang, this is a Valk 5. I've actually never owned an Wushuang, and like many people were comparing the two, and I also broke 130 with this as well as I magnetized this because at the time factory magnetized cube were not widespread until the end of 2016, and I even did a dual adjustment experiment. Okay, the last one was in 2022, but everything else I mentioned was in 2016 and 17 itself. The Weichuang GTS is pretty fast for its time, but of course now it's slower than most modern cubes, and even the 6x6s are probably faster than it. Actually 6x6s are faster than 5x5s now, if you're talking about the Aoshu and the Meilong. The Weichuang also has a really smooth, silky and glidey feel. The corner cutting is phenomenal for its time, and if you compare against modern cubes, they actually don't really cut much more in terms of like absolute angle. However, the effort needed to cut is definitely reduced. In size-wise, the Weichuang is actually 64mm across, and at the time most 5x5s were 63, so this is not too different. But against modern cubes, however, this thing is a giant, and it weighs like a tank. And overall in 2016 itself, the Wushuang was the more popular model of the two, and Qiyi has largely kept the mechanism same for the Valk 5 and Hong 5x5 with just very minor changes only. Whereas Moi completely abandoned the Weichuang mechanism in favor of a super anti-deforming mechanism, which is now the design of the Aoshuang GTS and WRM, and overall just superior to the Weichuang in every way, and it's a good decision on Moi's part in order to stay competitive. However, I do think there's some value inside the Weichuang's design that gives it some uniqueness, which there are two major features that set the Weichuang GTS apart from most cubes. One of which is that it's not a double anchor cube, it only has one anchor, and the second layer is deeper than the first layer, as opposed to the more common design where the first layer is deeper than the second. The cube also features a reverse foot design, and in this case it's actually even more prominent than it is on the Wu series cubes, where here you can only see a really small spike coming out that goes under the outer layer, whereas here you can see the foot is actually much bigger and it actually descends below the first layer and also hooks backwards in a similar manner. In a weird way, the Wushuang is actually a Weichuang GTS just squashed into, made very, very shallow, and then a normal cube's mechanism, like a second anchor, is just added below. Or you can think of it the reverse. The Weichuang is actually an Wushuang with the bottom half eliminated and the top half made bigger. Having a second layer deeper than the first is actually a very exploitable feature, especially in 4x4, because it means that you don't need to rely on having a continuous piece of plastic stretching from the top of the center all the way down to the core, such as the central pillar of the XB alignment mechanism, giving more options of alignment mechanisms to prevent the hidden inner layer from turning on its own. You can actually just hook the core directly to the second layer, such as those seen on the Ishin and Xiongshou 4x4s, and this in turn can make way for a fully contactless maglev and stockless center design, something that even layer cubes can't really do due to the constraints of the XB alignment mechanism. Even though second layer deeper than the first is associated with the older 4x4s, the Weichuang GTS is a testament that this design can keep up with the times, or at least being competitive with the other 2016 cubes, which have more conventional designs. So given that we now have modern technology to produce thinner and lighter pieces, as well as making smaller and thinner cores as compared to the very big heavy one, it would actually not be far out of our imagination to imagine a modernized version of this cube with all the lighter and smaller hardware in it, and this pretty much takes care of the main issue why it couldn't really keep up with most of the modern cubes, which is it's just bigger and heavier, and it's also significantly less stable, which the last issue can be pretty much taken care of by the new magnet technology that we have, such as core corner magnetization, which I do think it can significantly jack up the stability. And while I don't think this is going to be like top level stability that can be used in most big cubes, I do think it has a certain level of viability, especially in 4x4, because the turning style of 4x4 is less reliant on stability and a little bit more on corner cutting as compared to a bigger cube. And this in turn, since we can pretty much abuse the fact that we have more freedom to design the alignment mechanism, this actually gives some potential to our hypothetical Weisu WRM. We can make it maglev, we can make the cube faster, we can allow for higher levels of auto alignment, and finally, it should be easier than the conventional mag to make the cube super light, since we pretty much subtracted part of the mechanism away. So even if not a top tier flagship 4x4, I do think that a 4x4 that uses a Weichuang mag is a potential reservoir to test various technologies, and it would be quite interesting to see this mechanism make a return.